All right, everybody. So welcome to all. My name is Ben Weinlich with Skills Society, and kind of part of launching and kind of getting Action Lab set up along with a lot of other cool people in the room that have helped make this happen. Skills Society, we're one of the largest disability service organizations in Edmonton, and something that we've been championing innovation, I'd say, for the whole 30-some years, that we've been striving to support the engaged citizenship of people with disabilities. And we haven't just kind of talked about innovation, but we've done stuff for the last 5 years, like the Citizen Action Lab process. We'll talk a little bit today how we're trying to look at creative ways of how we help people with disabilities have meaningful roles in community. So we've been trying to really walk our talk around innovation for some years, and we're super excited that Action Lab is coming to fruition. So a couple little things before I forget. Make yourself at home, rate our cupboards, go through there. We really want this to be kind of a homey feeling, that it's really comfortable like that. Bathrooms. There are bathrooms right out here. There's bathrooms on the main floor. The really cool bathrooms are on the 4th floor, so if you want to have a little excursion up there, they're up there. The swag bags, so we gave everybody an empathy map, a magnet, that we use in the lab, and if you stay for the open house afterwards, we're going to be using that and exploring that. So there's a little taster of one of these tools that we have from the lab. It's pretty cool that you can use. So that's in your bag, as well as some tea from our community infusion project and a few other little goodies. If you're tweeting today, we claimed it Action Lab YEG, so we're using that, as well as at Skills Society. And please, there's t-shirts out there if you want, so these status quo t-shirts, which are pretty cool. Sarah Herview designed them. And as well as our Action Lab t-shirts are out there that support Skills Society. And what else? Please stay after if you want to. When we transition from the keynotes to that, it's going to be chaos. We'll just embrace the chaos of that. Drinks are going to happen. We're going to move the chairs out, and then people are going to be going to the different stations, and awesomeness will ensue. So, big welcome to Mr. David Shepherd, MLA Edmonton Centre. He's been doing stuff also with us here in the Action Lab with McDougall community, so really excited to have him here. Mayor Don Iveson. Whoop, whoop. Tim Draimin from Social Innovation Generation in Toronto. Mark Cabaj from Here2There. Minds around social innovation in Canada. We're very lucky that they're here and going to share some information and knowledge around that. Skills board and leadership team that's here, that's really kind of championed this and supported all this to happen. And Manasc Isaac, who are designers, Vivian and Josh, who really took the vision and brought this to life. So excited about that. Anything I missed, people, that I should be? The guest book. Jamie Kaleo designed this really rad guest book, and it's better to kind of sign the guest book at the end, because you can use a quote or do a picture or do a hashtag, whatever you want. So as you go through your experience here, if you can kind of go to the guest book after, that would be awesome. So how did this come about? A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, or like 3 years ago, we were on 2 floors of this building, and we had this idea. We had this big training space downstairs, and we thought, how can we use this internally for our workshops and things we need to do at Skills Society, but also have some type of a change lab, a social innovation lab to support community. So we went after and applied for the Blue Sky Award with Manasc Isaac to help with the design, and were successful with that, but then some challenges happened in terms of what was happening with the building at that time, and so we kind of, our dreams were squashed for a little bit, and then about 6 months ago we had the oh crap moment where this space came available. So we moved to a smaller footprint just on this floor, but this space became available, and we called up Vivian and said, can you do us a solid here? Like, we kind of need to design something in like a few weeks to get rolling, and she jumped to it and really helped us out with that. So we had a session with community where we designed what it would feel like in this space and how it would be used. So we did some visioning with Vivian. So that's this space right here, where that's what this picture is. And went through kind of what we want the place to feel like, and prototyped it. Debbie this is a big ball. So I think those balls morphed into those stools over there and other things. Taping. So just kind of having fun with it, designing this together collectively about what could really be cool, which is also a big part of what happens in the lab. Rather than designing solutions to challenges to people, designing with people. And that's the spirit of what we're trying to do at Action Lab. So we went through that, and Josh and Vivian were looking at things, and Also realizing, the cost of what it's going to be, and thanks to an Alberta Culture Grant, we were able to make this happen. So pretty close to what it looks like. This was meeting, the builders are really great. They're called the SWAT team, Special Work and Tactics. And General Kajener here briefing the SWAT team on how it's going to all happen. But this was just an awesome process to see this evolve and emerge over time. So we've already started to use it internally, and officially, as you can see, we still have a little bit of scaffolding that is coming down still, so we waited until all that was done until we could launch. We had a variety of workshops in here. We had a McDougall community lab with that community exploring what kind of space and programs could really be innovative to help bottom-up innovation emerge from McDougall community. Make Something Edmonton's been in here. Usually these are maybe some government workers here. So there's 3 pillars to the Action Lab. There's the space, which people can rent. It's the social enterprise for Skills Society. So really inspiring space people can use for their strategic planning, projects, those kinds of things. There's facilitation and workshops. So people saying, we need some cooler strategic planning. We can help you with that. Workshops around quality of life, design thinking, all of those things. Stay tuned on our website for that. And then the social innovation lab part. So we're going to do one this year by the end of the year, which will be, we're going to work with community, find out what's a real challenge area that we could dive into over 3 to 6 months. Convene this really great lab team, go out into community. So this will be kind of the base where things will happen, but we'll be going out into community on the ground, kind of work with people to explore and co-design solutions with community. So that's really where some cool stuff's going to happen. So one of the things often in leading change, we kind of do a top-down version, and we're trying to kind of move away to new models, these change labs. So we convene executives, policymakers, we get smart people in a room, and we say, yeah, what's really been happening? What are the challenges? We make a new program or intervention, and we say, oh, this will be really innovative because it's on the cutting edge, and we unleash it on people, and then sometimes people say, well, we didn't really want that. It isn't really quite the service, the thing we wanted. Human-centered design thinking, which is part of this, what underlies the Action Lab, it's people first. So who are the people experiencing a challenge? How can we work with people to design solutions together? What could trigger change in a positive way? We prototype and test quickly, and have policy champions in the room to support that. So one thing kind of relates. So sometimes if we get nice, pretty design, where we say, oh, this is so beautiful, design this path, right? People will want that. And if we really hung out with people to see what they want, actually they just want a shortcut to go that way. So you only really learn that by hanging out with people to understand what they really need. And so this is kind of the piece of, rather than designing in ivory towers away from people, we want to convene the right groups and go out into community and explore in that way. So the social lab will convene diverse groups of citizen explorers, policymakers. There'll be on-the-ground research. We'll explore assumptions and root causes. We'll prototype solutions. We'll test, and proposals or implementation of social innovation will emerge. So we've been working on something called, sometimes it gets confused, the Citizen Action Lab, which is our process over the last 5 years that we've been tweaking. There's a little write-up on the wall over there. It's twofold. One is about how do we enhance the citizenship experience of people with disabilities, and how do we grow capacity internally in our organization. We have about 500 employees. How do we grow ways for people to think and do differently, to think of creative ways to connect people in community? So one example, we have this process, so we do a little bit of light ethnographic research on the ground, hanging out with people. So learning a bit about Todd, loves weed whacking. Weed whacking is like meditation to Todd. Work means value. Work means money for smokes in a truck. And any place I can hang a smoke and chat with people is awesome. So really learning who people are, what motivates them, what they're into, coming up with ideas for how we could help them have meaningful roles in community. So there's a phase of diverging, creating choices, converging on possibilities. Lots of sticky notes, death by sticky notes sometimes. We try to make our ideas visual, because there's something that happens in just talking about things, but to make them visual, that's more powerful. And then we test it, going out with Todd and seeing. So starting up a little business that he could go out in community, checking how that goes. So again, it's twofold. It's about outcomes for people, and it's about growing capacity to think and do differently. So I'm going to invite up Vivian and Josh about kind of their experience of the lab, anything they want to say, and also they took the lab for a test run, and seriously, when I came in and watched how they used it, it was just like, whoa, these are pros. They used everything in the lab. It was unbelievable. So, Vivian Manasc.
Okay. Thanks, Ben, and thanks for that great introduction. Just a little background. At Manasc Isaac, we've actually applied this kind of approach to design work and designing buildings and spaces for people for the past 35 years. So we just invented this just the last week or two. No, we've actually been doing this for decades. And about a decade ago, we came up with this idea for a Blue Sky Award, which is our way of giving our approach to design services back to the community. So we were really delighted when Ben put forward the proposal for this skills lab because it fit our vision so beautifully, and that was why they were selected as the winners of the Blue Sky Award a couple of years ago. So we were super thrilled to be able to work with you, and you guys have been an absolute delight to work with, and we're really very pleased to see how well this has turned out. So I'm just going to say, our sort of 50-person design firm has a monthly staff meeting, and we've been doing this for decades. And normally we just hold it at our office, but once or twice a year we go off-site just to do an actual staff meeting off-site, and often we'd like to use a space that we've actually designed or helped create. And so in December, Ben was good enough to let us use the lab, and it happened that it was right at the time of the COP21 talks in Paris. So we are a firm that's focused on sustainable design. We've been leading the conversation about green buildings for over 20 years. We founded the Canadian Green Building Council, the LEED Green Building Rating System, all those things. So we're concerned about climate change and its impact and the influence that we have as designers of the built environment on the planet and on the people who have to live on this planet. And so we thought that it might be a fun workshop for our staff because it is something we think about all the time, to actually focus our attention and to sort of think about what are the top 10 things that we would propose to the Alberta government. Because when the new government, our new provincial government, our Rachel Notley government, with help from David and others, basically announced ahead of the COP21 talks in Paris that we are finally going to have a climate change policy in Alberta, we were thrilled. And we said, well, the built environment is part of that. In what way is it part of it? And we were sort of pleased that the government hadn't really shaped that piece of it. So we felt it was an opportunity to talk about it. As it happened, I had an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Infrastructure later in December, and so I thought I'd use this as a good starting point for conversation. So we essentially brought our entire team here, so about 50 architects, engineers, planners, designers of all stripes. And we workshopped our way through different groups, setting up different ideas of what we would recommend to government. And we had 100 ideas in the space of sort of an hour. And then we winnowed that down and came up with our top 10 ideas. And those top 10 ideas, basically through using the tools here in the workshop, really helped, because a number of our staff are architects and engineers and planners and are used to doing this all the time. But we also have staff who are communication staff and support staff and accounting staff and all kinds of other folks who aren't part of the design conversation on a day-to-day basis. And everybody contributed, everybody got into the swing of it, and everybody came up with tremendous ideas. And out of that, we actually synthesized 10 action items, which I think we have a handout here. I think Josh has got copies if you're really curious what those 10 items are. I'm not here to tell you about all of those, but we did put forward 10 clear recommendations to the government to say, these are the things that we think we as a province should be doing to mitigate climate change risk through the built environment lens. So we found that this space really made a huge difference to our team. Even though we're very accustomed to doing design and design workshops, we found that this space really created a level of animation that was way more exciting than just our normal workshop process. So as a result of that, I've asked Ben to make me a few of these kits, and we're going to take some of them back to our office, and we're going to be back here with some of our client groups to use this space as a way to further innovation in the world of design and construction, so in the architectural and engineering world. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh just to say a few words from his perspective.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add, but I did want to say that obviously successful projects take more than just an architect or a designer. They also take great clients and great contractors, and I guess we were lucky enough on this project to have both. So I just wanted to say, thank you to Ben and Pat and everybody at Skills, and I don't know if he's here, but also Dave and the SWAT team. You guys were both great to work with. And you made this project, or helped make this project, into something that was not only a lot of fun to work with, but I'd say is pretty close to what we could imagine as a best case scenario when we were thinking about the Blue Sky Award. So I think I'd just like to maybe ask you all to give a round of applause to Ben and Pat and Dave. And that's pretty much all I had to say. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll turn it back to Ben.
Thank you very much. So just a quick thing here. So huge thanks to Manasc Isaac, Alberta Culture, David Egan for the CFIP grant, SIG, Social Innovation Generation, so Kelsey, Tim, they've been huge supports for this. So they've come from Toronto, they're speaking today, they've been boosters of the Action Lab around, so really happy about that. ABSI, Alberta Social Innovation Connect. If you don't know about it, check it out. So Aaliyah and her colleagues here, they're also going to be running some of the lab stations after. So they're exploring the social innovation ecosystem in Alberta, and it's some amazing stuff that's emerging. There's a great blog, great stories. What is impacting systems change? What are the patterns of that? All of those things. So huge thanks to ABSI Connect and Skills Society for the board and the leadership team to have the vision to say something is like, hey, we're going to do this crazy change lab. And they're like, yeah, we're going to make that. We're going to figure that out. Because it is quite new, kind of emergent work. And so for that kind of leadership to take the risk to do that, that's a pattern of innovation and we're doing stuff. Stuff's happening. So huge thanks to the board, to Cindy, and leadership team. Okay, that's that. And welcome, Mr. David Shepherd, MLA Edmonton Centre. Also the guy who sold me my first sampler, Long and McQuaid, back in the day. Come on over, musician. All right, come on up.
Well, thanks, Ben. It's fantastic to get to be here and join everyone here tonight for the opening, the public opening of the Skills Lab. Here, of course, tonight on behalf of Premier Rachel Notley, my colleagues in the Government of Alberta. I'd like to start by acknowledging the fantastic and incredibly important work that's done by Skills Society themselves. It can be incredibly easy for Albertans with disabilities to be marginalized, overlooked, left out of public life. And Skills provides crucial supports and services. They engage in advocacy to help ensure that these Albertans get to enjoy all the same opportunities that the rest of us do. My own niece, Brooklyn, has greatly benefited from the supports that Skills provides. And thanks to their help, she's enrolled in the child care program over at MacEwan University. So I really appreciate the work that Skills does. And in that work, they're building bridges with businesses, schools, organizations, communities across Edmonton. They're connecting they're connecting over shared interests and to come together to solve mutual problems. And now they're continuing that work here with this great new fantastic community resource here at the Action Lab. I had the chance, as was mentioned, to attend a session here back in December with some residents of Central McDougall and a few other community organizations. And I can say from experience, this is a space that really does inspire dialogue and real conversation. It's a beautiful design. Thank you again to Manasc Isaac for their contributions and their time put into designing this space. It really is something I think that inspires creativity and really does help develop ideas. It's a space I think that also really reflects what makes Edmonton great. That being our ingenuity, our willingness to roll up our sleeves, and our commitment to building grassroots solutions from the ground up. So I'm incredibly thankful to Skills for investing in this space, for working to make it happen, and for making it available for so many other groups to come in and use. I'm really excited for, I think, the great conversations and the fantastic ideas that I know are going to come out of here. So thanks again to everybody who worked on this, who put in the time to make it happen. Looking forward to see what's going to come. Thank you.
All right, and next we're going to welcome Mayor Don Iveson. We had to make sure that he blended in with the walls, right? So we had to have a picture that blended in really nicely there. Yeah, Mayor Don Iveson. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Ben. Let's let's be careful of our judgments. I think what you can take away from that actually is that though life and the world can seem quite daunting at times, if we can stay tapped into our relentless optimism, we can do extraordinary things. And the best way to do that is in community. It's really, really hard to be a solipsistic optimist. I've tried it and it doesn't work. And so instead, I turned to public life, and now I'm the most public person in the city, which is terrifying sometimes. But I get to come to things like this. I get to be re-inspired all the time by the efforts of people in this community to ignite change, to support one another, particularly to support vulnerable Edmontonians and Edmontonians who really can thrive and can do extraordinary things, but need additional community support, who absolutely cannot be optimistic if they're solipsistic. And so I really admire the work of Skills Society, and I'm grateful that they're here in our community making a difference. And then to not just be content with the traditional way of doing things, to seek solutions in partnership and in community, and even like this to create space for dialogue across a whole range of opportunities for social innovation. I think the city, the broader community, is a wonderful beneficiary of that. And so I'm grateful to have the opportunity to say thank you on behalf of Edmonton City Council for your leadership and your vision in creating not only this space, but even more importantly, the kind of program that's that you're already running here. And having heard a little bit about what you've done so far, you know, I can imagine all kinds of opportunities for different organizations to use this space, and this is going to become extremely popular. I can sense that already. And looking at who's in the room here, knowing many of you, I can see you're already plotting events for your own organizations in here, because this is a beautiful space. And so to General Kajener and I guess Empress Vivian Manasc, or Imperator Vivian maybe, very, very nice work. It's always wonderful to celebrate local design talent. But to take a design approach to social challenges and to social inclusion, I think requires starting with people who are affected by those decisions. And so right at the very beginning, the notion that this space is to hear from community about what their needs are and what their solutions are, I think is very bottom up, very consistent with how local government tries to do things. And it's hard to do it at the city level. I'm sometimes jealous of mayors I get to work with in Northern Alberta who work in much, much smaller communities, because they can literally convene the community at the coffee shop or at the curling rink, and they can do this kind of thing at the municipal level. It's much harder for us to do that when you have a amazing city of 900,000 people. And so you need spaces like this, you need program like this, and you need partners like are in the room in order to engage with a complex and diverse community like this. But this is totally consistent with where we're going with our approaches to public engagement and public involvement. And so I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for the city to engage and use this space as we try to learn. And certainly we're going to try to marry up top-down leadership for things like eliminating poverty with bottom-up, making sure that what we're doing there is relevant to people in the community of those who are disabled, for example. And so I think you need all levels of engagement, and space like this facilitates that. So I guess I'll end on a thought. I was looking at the biographies of all the new parliamentarians, because I went and spoke in Ottawa a week or two ago to a whole bunch of the new parliamentarians, and they all have their occupation, lawyer, teacher, business person. And I started thinking, oh man, what's my occupation? I can't really, it's communications, public relations. That always sounds bad. It's like, oh, okay, career politician, right? And then I realized what I like to describe myself as if I'm given the opportunity to think about it, and that's social entrepreneur, because all the work that I've done has always been of that view. How can you convene people? How can you create social capital? How can you operate in an entrepreneurial and innovative and business-like way, but do it in a way that advances more than just the bottom line? Maybe you can even make money and plow that money away from, you don't have pesky shareholders who you need to pay dividends, so you can plow it all back into the good that you're trying to create. And that's how I operated in the different things that I did before I entered public life. And so this space resonates with me that way, because it's very much in tune with how I identify in terms of the work that I do. So congratulations. I really love that it says on this podium, a place to think differently, which is very, very Edmonton, and more importantly, make ideas happen. So making this about action, talk's good. We do lots of that at City Hall, but turning it into a difference in everyday Edmontonians' lives is a real sweet spot, and you guys are going to play a crucial role in that long into the future, I can tell already. So thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So, really excited to welcome Mr. Tim Draimin, social innovation maven, connector, social innovation ecosystem field builder, envisaging impacts from Canada's emerging social innovation lab and cross-sector collaboration solutions system. Awesome guy that is doing some really innovative work across Canada and supporting innovators all the way across. Okay, Tim Draimin, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here with you all. And at one level, I kind of feel I should just put down the microphone and say that you've just heard it all already from everybody who's spoken, who basically have talked to you about this whole amazing place where I think Canada is at, that we're at an inflection point where so many of the challenges that we face, we're starting to put together the infrastructure to be able to take on those challenges and own some solutions that we want to generate. And I'm also thinking that it's not very often I get to speak in a room where we have everybody from elected officials to business people, to people from the university and the academic community, from people from the social sector, who are all coming together and sitting, looking at how we solve problems from the recognition that basically it's only by linking arms that we're going to be able to do all this together. So those are the kind of key messages from tonight. So Mark and I have decided that we'll just start the party now. So you're okay with that, right, Mark? Yeah. No, I think that they really do want us to go through a few slides, so I'm gonna do that. And basically, my role today is really to be flying at 35,000 feet and just talk a bit about the global context in which this new entity is emerging in the way it is. And I have to say that I have the benefit of traveling across Canada and seeing a lot of new initiatives that are happening, but really there's stuff that's happening in Edmonton that really isn't happening anywhere else in Canada. And when I think of where Canada's social Silicon Valley is located, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking it's really starting in Edmonton. So, but I want to place that in a broader context. I work with a partnership of a university, of a foundation, and it was started with a frontline social service agency like Skills Society. And it emerged from the challenge that the foundation was funding a lot of social innovators, but discovering that great ideas didn't naturally go to scale. And they realized that what they needed to do really was to help catalyze an enabling environment that would help really good ideas get to what Mayor Iveson said, get to impact. And so SIG was created with a mandate for it'll be 11 years, and we'll shut our doors next year, to basically try to find ways to help decision makers, policy makers, help leaders in all 4 sectors to be able to help create a stronger, innovative environment in Canada. So what I thought I'd do today is just talk about 5 of the key things that we're seeing about this field. The first one is that we think that social innovation isn't just a can-do, it's really a must-do. As people have already alluded to, our society is facing major challenges. We're 7 billion people on the planet. By the turn of the century, we're going to be 11 or 12 billion people. Even just looking at a situation like Europe right now, facing an influx of refugees, we realize that there are so many places where our fragile social and ecological systems are under duress. And we currently don't have the tools to be able to help us manage how we invent the solutions to the new kinds of complex problems that we face. So a lot of us do think of things like innovation. But in actual fact, I think most of us, when we're asked what do we think about innovation, we think about our smartphones or we think about the internet. But I think that the real opportunity is for us to recognize that innovation is more of a 3-legged stool. I think of innovation as including technological innovation, so important, business innovation, like business model innovation, like new aspects of the sharing economy, but also social innovation. And social innovation is relatively new. Google Books now can tell us that the term emerged 200 years ago, but really it hasn't been a field of research until the last 20 to 25 years. And so the benefit is really we now have emerging knowledge that we can apply in the same way that we've been doing that around technological innovation going back nearly a century and a half. But social innovation, as the name applies, is really around innovations that are social in their means and social in their ends. And it's really a way to leverage the business and the technological innovation to be able to bring about improvements in society. SIG has a definition that's up there that's relatively complex. But basically, our definition of social innovation, it has to tackle the root causes of the problem. We want to shift the problem. We want to change the dynamics that have created the problem in the first place. And we're pretty agnostic about what it takes to be able to do that. It's our own ingenuity that's the limiting factor for what that could be. If it's a policy, it's a program, it's a product, whatever it could be, all of those things are game. But they really have to be things that change the defining routines of society and shift things in a positive way. A lot of people talk about social enterprise, social finance, social partnerships, corporate social innovation, and all of those things are part of the field of social innovation. And we see them as building blocks within the field of social innovation, but they're not necessarily on their own social innovations. Social enterprise as a concept is a social innovation. Not all social enterprises are social innovations. People talk about other types of terms to express this whole idea about social innovation. Some people talk now about social R&D. Social R&D is trying to speak to people in the social sector. We know that globally the top firms in the world spend 15 or 16% of their annual revenue on innovation. A research report from the United States of 2,500 nonprofits said less than 5% of nonprofits are using innovation to improve the work that they're doing. They're just basically delivering programs. So social R&D is really a challenge to the social sector. How do we really think more intentionally about how we do social innovation? There's also the whole movement around grand challenges where we pick a big problem and we put out an award and say, okay, let's incent people to be able to come up with solutions to this. Or they talk about rewiring the system or cracking the code on social innovation. These kind of represent the thinking behind what we're trying to do with social innovation. Our key intellectual leader at SIG is Frances Wesley, who wrote Getting to Maybe, and she's just an awesome person. She's created an educational graduate diploma in social innovation that's now been taken over by the Banff School here in Alberta. And she talks about social innovation through 4 different vectors. You know, how you reach out because you're working with others, how you reach deep into the culture where we're situated and figure out how we leverage that culture for the change we want. How do you reach up and down and influence things like public policy? And how do you do that with great care? All innovations have a possibility of doing harm. There's a lot of unintentional harm that can be generated through innovation. So we have to be very, very thoughtful. So second observation is social innovation is really the heart of a growing global movement. So it's just not a body of knowledge. There's actually a movement of people and organizations and activities that are generating an increasing body of expertise, knowledge, and insight that can inform what we're doing. It's totally extending around the world. These are just some examples of what's happening around the world right now. Most of these examples of new centers looking at innovation, they've all appeared within the last decade. And that's a small sampling of ones. For example, the Boston mayor has created an office of new urban mechanics as a way of creating a center of gravity to support innovation work that's happening in the city of Boston. Los Angeles has created the Civic Innovation Lab. We have in the UK an organization called Nesta, which is created with a £300 million endowment to help act as a support system for the United Kingdom's ability to do innovation. The mayor of Seoul has basically dedicated Seoul to becoming the world's leading social innovation city. So it's now becoming something very, very widespread. In Canada, we have a whole series of institutions across the country which have started up again within the last decade. One that's only started in the last year is in Montreal. Amplify Montreal. It brings together the city, business leaders, the community sector, the universities and the foundations to try to create a plan for fast-tracking social and economic improvements for the city of Montreal. I'll go through some more as I go in more detail. So there's obviously one in Canada. And I would say that these are some examples of social innovations in Canada. It's interesting, over a decade ago, a book appeared from Oxford University Press, and it had a page on 10 world-changing social innovations. 2 of the 10 were Canadian. One was the Women's Institute, which started in the 1890s by a group of women who were trying to figure out ways to help improve health outcomes for children, especially. And now it's a global movement in 65 different countries with tens of thousands of women participating in it. Or the Great Bear Rainforest. Today, for those of us who aren't here, you could be in Vancouver celebrating with the Premier of British Columbia finally reaching the launch of the protection of 16 million acres of the west coast of British Columbia as old-growth forest and support for sustainable livelihoods for First Nations in the west coast forest, and having for the first time what's called ecosystem-based management. That program, what's called integrated ecosystem development, is now a model that's been used around the world for economic and environmental protection. Obviously, other people can talk much more informed way than I can about Alberta, but together with my colleagues, and Kelsey Spitz is here, and the folks from the APSI Fellows that have been mentioned, we've just been becoming much more aware of a lot of the innovations that are happening within organizations here in the province. And there's just a lot of stuff that's happening, and I think the real opportunity is how do we connect the dots between all of those things to be able to help people recognize who else is in their community, where is the expertise, and how can they work together with greater facility to be able to leapfrog the kinds of activities that they're involved in doing. Third insight is that social innovation is totally all about collaboration. It's like collective intelligence. An individual can do so much. Collectively, we can do so much more. How we shift from a history of the last century of building very well-defined silos like the academic sector or government or business or the social sector. There's a lot of cultural ties that say that we should just work within those silos and within our organizations. So social innovation really challenges that to say, actually, we have to work more together. So in Alberta, obviously, there's a lot that's happening at the level of government right now. I'd say that the leading lab within governments across Canada is the Alberta CoLab, and isn't Alex here from Alberta CoLab? And it's probably the most sophisticated example of a platform that's been able to help people figure out how to do innovation from inside of the public sector. Anyway, there's it's another example of the leadership of this province. This is just a slide showing some of the things that are happening public sector and others across Canada. And again, Alberta really does stand out for having a lot of leadership. Now, there is one kind of, trip in the road that we had. There was the Social Innovation Endowment that we were all hoping that was going to be launched. And it didn't. It was, December of 2014 that it was canceled. But I think it represented a significant aspiration of how do we shift the province from where it has been in terms of its ability to successfully carry out these kinds of innovations to where it would like to be. So there is an endowment, but how do we capitalize on that aspiration? The private sector. I think, especially for the sector I come from, the social sector, this is a bit of an anathema for a lot of people, that basically business can be a really important piece of the social change puzzle. And I think there's a lot of great businesses that have been able to weave social outcomes within their business model and create a blended value. One of them, which is Edmonton-based, is the Running Room. I think John Stanton is amazing, that he's been able to create a national, highly successful chain of stores selling shoes, running shoes, but really around it, he's created this whole ethos of health, people running and partnering with charities to do charity runs. And through all that, he is the most modest guy in the world. It's really, really quite amazing. There's a lot of other examples. Globally, we have the example of Draimin, which is the microfinance movement in Bangladesh, partnering with Danone to create the Draimin Danone yogurt business that basically employs a lot of very poor people in Bangladesh and provides a nutritionally important additional source of nutrition for people in Bangladesh, a joint business. And the social sector is really now at a really important moment where basically their aspirations of trying to create these really important social changes for their communities, that they now have access to resources that they didn't. Really, the values and the objectives of the social sector are now being placed in an opportunity to be embraced much more directly by the other sectors and in partnership with the other sectors. So it really does mean a significant mind shift on the part of people, plus trying to figure out how would we do things differently. We're not just fundraising anymore. We're trying to finance solutions. That's a really big shift in thinking on the part of the social sector. And I guess the question of funders for all of this. We've had a history where foundations, for example, or government have been giving out grants for projects. We're right now on the cusp of a transition of people funding for outputs, for wanting to fund for outcomes. And if they're going to be able to do that successfully, it won't necessarily be because each funder works individually, but really they would recognize that they're a part of a system themselves and have to figure out how do they connect with other funders and how do they answer these questions about finding the right models of change, figuring out how value is most effectively created, and how their collaboration can maximize the impact of what it is they're looking for. So for us, as I mentioned earlier, social innovation is really all about systems thinking. It's moving from the piecemeal and from tackling or trying to manage a symptom of a problem to tackling the root cause. Now, to say that you want to think about things through a systems lens is much easier than actually doing it. It's really, really hard. Systems are very complex beasts, and they've evolved to protect themselves. They create a whole wraparound of culture which tries to squash anything that wants to disrupt them. So it's not very easy. Buckminster Fuller used to talk about the fact that he thought the system change happened as people kind of incrementally build new elements for an emerging adaptation or a substitute system, and at a certain point things just kind of cruised over, like it finally just tilted. I'm not exactly sure how it happens in different domains. It happens differently. We're trying to learn a lot about it, and we're recognizing how difficult it is to be able to bring it about. And Donella Meadows is one of those people who says you really have to engage with the system, and through the engagement of the system, you'll learn more and gain more insight about how you'll be able to shift the system. Jeff Mulligan from Nesta talks about the fact that we can add the whole idea of changing systems into the linear path that we've already created around how do we create innovations and how do we scale innovations, but now think much more integratively about how that systems lens can be brought to bear as we start and go through the whole process and bring it more directly to bear in what we're trying to do. What I think is really interesting is we're seeing new platforms that are embracing social innovation and embracing a systems perspective, and trying to do that in a more systematic way to provide the capacity building support. So one that's really amazing is Living Cities, exists in the United States. I just spoke to the CEO last week. It's 25 years as a staffed organization. It's 35 years first as a network without staff, and now it has the heads of 22 major organizations, from the Citibank Foundation to the head of the Rockefeller Foundation, the head of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and they basically are trying to figure out what are programs that can help our cities move from where they are to where they need to be. How do we create a network of cities and of innovations in cities, and how do we spread those across the United States? They have a network of the chiefs of staff of 35 cities that's supported by Harvard, and they use that as a conveyor belt to share and spread the innovations that are happening across the system. They try to come to their programs from the point of view that anything they involve themselves in, they're going to do it for at least 10 years. They recognize that most people that come to their tables has a job for 3 years and they change jobs. They say, we have to break that. So we're creating programmatic activities that go for a decade at least. And we're trying to get people to think long term. And we're trying to get people to think about how the ultimate change of each of our programs is going to be about system change. These are some other examples. I could go through them all. I'm just pointing out that basically there's now an emerging infrastructure of different types of organizations that are trying to support the thinking around this. So I'm involved with SIX. SIX is a global network of social innovators. Their website is a support system for social innovators from around the world to try to share existing social innovations, help people understand how they can use them themselves. Safera is an emerging platform that basically wants to be able to be the repository of as many social innovations as possible. They'll break down those social innovations into their individual parts and then show people how those parts could be recombined and adapted to local conditions in countries around the world. So I think there's going to be a lot more about labs, so I'm going to go quickly over this. But labs are really, they're like a heart of the system. It's like they're part of the central nervous system or the central circulatory system. They're the place where a lot of these issues come together. There needs to be a container, a safe place where all the sectors come together, with all these ideas come together. And as people have talked about earlier, there's a way to process all this stuff to be able to come up with some great solutions and start prototyping them. I think it's important to realize that the social innovation labs that we're talking about today are the beneficiaries. They're standing on the shoulders of many other people who've developed numerous fields of knowledge. And what social innovation labs are trying to do is to build on all those different fields of knowledge and bring them together and place them at the service of people who are grappling with these very difficult challenges. An example of systems thinking and the use of all this in a lab is one called the Housing Action Lab. It was created in Toronto. It was trying to deal with the issue of affordable housing. Basically, they brought together all the players in the system: provincial government, federal government, city, the builders, social housing providers, policy groups, and put them all together over a period of time to kind of crunch the issues. And within 1 year, they already had a $20 million prototype project with the City of Toronto around affordable housing in partnership with Tradell. They had a policy group, Pembina, partnering with the Builders Association around new policy papers they were doing together. They had TD Bank do a paper on financing of affordable housing. That was all of a product that really broke a logjam in Toronto around the whole issue of affordable housing, just by finding a place to start to get people together. City Studio is another one. City Studio is in Vancouver. It's supporting the city of Vancouver. It engages 7 different academic campuses across the city. It tries to leverage all those resources around tackling very specific problems that the city has. As they say, they want to create the equivalent of a teaching hospital, but around civic innovation. And that's leading to the city deciding they're going to actually create an in-house lab to help them with internal processes right now. I'm just going to start going pretty quickly. So, yeah, another metaphor to use around these labs, it's an opportunity for us to leapfrog, especially with all this emerging expertise that we're able to access from around the world. So finally, just want to refer to the fact that I think a really key thing about social innovation and about things like the Action Lab, is they just doesn't happen on its own. It takes a whole matrix of resources from around the community that would come together that cumulatively contribute to actually creating the enabling conditions for the kinds of things to happen that we'd like to see happen. And obviously, these are just some of the 6 that we've been becoming much more familiar with through the decade of work that we've been undertaking. And a big one is mindset. If people think that there's no possibility of change, they're not going to spend their time and effort and energy on it. They have to have the skill sets to be able to approach it. Where do those all come from? They need to have a way to engage the public and have a story that explains what this is all about. And ideally, they have a story that, in a sense, opens people's minds up to next steps about where this could all go. They need to find a way to leverage new resources. And in a sense, continue to build the movement for the social change that they're trying to work on. So this is just a representation graphically of what are all those different pieces that come together to be able to make these labs work. And I guess all of us could think about where we come from. Where is the place that we fit on this map? What are the ways in which we could be making a contribution to enabling this ecosystem to be more dynamic and to be more successful in ways of working together? Another analogy might be we're kind of crafting new DNA around how we do this innovation work. It has all these different constituent parts. How do we each help ensure that we can add that DNA into the system? And that we're all doing this with the sense that we don't really know what the solutions are we're going to generate, because it's such an emergent and complex and dynamic context in which we're working. But we do have a sense of the North Star. We do have a sense about what the qualities of the solution are. So we don't have a roadmap, but we do have this set of emerging system resources like the Action Lab that can help us be able to color in the lines to be able to figure out where we're going to be able to go. So this is the first day of the second month of 2016. And obviously, it's a really, really big opportunity for Edmonton to see 2016 as a kind of turning point year for the city and for the province in terms of unleashing the resources that this Action Lab could bring to bear on the kinds of problems that the city of Edmonton has. And just imagining the Edmonton Journal, maybe it doesn't have a paper edition in 2026, but this is the article by this guy named Ben Weinlich, the civic affairs writer, about how he sees the city through the combined efforts of the City of Edmonton's Innovation Lab, the Government of Alberta Co-Lab, and the Community-Led Action Lab. It has been 365 days since any family in Edmonton has lived below the poverty line. So that's only going to take us another 10 years to be able to get there. So that's a great vision to be able to hope for. Having said that, I still do need to say that all innovations carry with them unintended consequences. We really have to be thinking about what those might be and to avoid them. But it's something we can do if we're thoughtful about it. So in summary, these are just some of the things that we think that social innovation is. And I just want to say congratulations to Ben and to Pat and the Skills Society for being able to pull this whole thing together. It's fabulous. Congratulations.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So, Mark Cabaj, first met Mark, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago. He came out to the Edmonton learning community and a bunch of us from here were there that day. He blew our minds around the life cycle of collaborative efforts. And so since then, we were like, Mark Cabaj, he's a gem to have in Edmonton, knows a lot about labs and patterns of what makes them successful. So he's hungry to shape, not endure, our future, a believer in human ingenuity, dedicated to supporting social innovators tackle the most vexing issues of our time. Mark Cabaj.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Tim, for setting us up like that, and thanks everyone for having us, giving us time to speak tonight. I wanted to know, Tim, I haven't told you this, but we do a little bit of stuff overseas as well, and someone had remarked about why there's so much social innovation stuff coming out of Canada, and I think part of it's just the attributes of being Canadian. But I also, at one point, kind of started drawing a little map with some, and I realized that a lot of stuff kind of traced back to SIG, Social Innovation Generation, and the work of Tim Draimin. So I'm going to ask you to thank Tim one more time, Tim. So I love this topic. Thanks, Ben. I've been watching Ben and the gang for quite some time, so it's a pleasure to come here to witness this opening, and I have some nice things to say about it, Ben. And I'm really glad that it's in Edmonton. I've been just saying Edmonton needs more of this for a whole bunch of reasons. I love our culture. I love our town. I always say, someone says, describes Edmonton, and I says, it oozes reasonable. It's such a reasonable human kind of town, but sometimes I think we need a bit of a punch in the arm to think creative, and it's happening all the time. I have moved back to a different city. We moved back 10 years ago, and it feels different, and it feels different because stuff like this is happening all the time. Ben asked me to make some contributions in terms of the ideas around the lab. I asked him how long I had to do that. He told me. I realized it takes that long to find my car keys. So I'm going to see if I can do this in a relatively quick period of time. But before I do, I'm going to get you talking in twos or threes, just to get warmed up. You've heard a lot about social innovation. You know about the kinds of challenges we're facing in Edmonton. Go to your neighbors, and in twos and threes, quickly try and come up with the three things that are in most demand of social innovation in Edmonton. Okay? You don't have to agree. Three things. In a group, we need social innovation on this topic. We need it now. Okay? Yeah. I don't use it all the time, but I'm going to use. Some of you have heard it already. I just praised Canada, but how do you get 100 Canadians? I heard this in Australia or New Zealand, actually. So I asked about some Canadian. They asked about Canadian jokes, and they had a lot of them. But here's my favorite: how do you get 100 Canadians out of the pool real fast? Real fast. Blow the whistle and say, "Hey guys, time to get out." So you guys are almost Canadian. So we could do a round. I just know that there's plenty of things we could be more inventive on, right? There's plenty of pressing social, economic, and environmental issues. And so what I wanted to do is we'll come back to your discussion shortly. I wanted to make 3 points here in the next number of minutes with a couple of anecdotes for each of them. Number one, the case for social innovation, number one. 2, labs as innovation platforms. And number 3, briefly but hopefully in a compelling way, the promise of Action Lab. Okay, case for social innovation. Okay. Simple. In 1973, 2 planners in England actually came up with a paper where they termed the phrase wicked problems. And they said, this was 1973, and they said, we're actually doing pretty good on tame problems, technical problems, problems for which the problem is well defined, answers are well known in advance, implementation is straightforward, results are predictable, and one organization or couple can manage the solution on its own. They actually said, we've actually licked most of those problems. What we're really having a hard time with are wicked problems, complex problems, or adaptive problems. And these have different characteristics. This is PowerPoint's a complex problem. Challenge is difficult to understand. Answers are not known in advance. Learning requires implementation. We learn by doing. We learn more about the problem and what does and does not work by thinking with your hands. Results are unpredictable, and more often than not, no one organization can muster a solution on its own. Quick check here. Do your problems fall into the ones you raised? Are they technical, simple problems, or are they complex, adaptive ones? Almost all of them. Although there's I'm not going to abuse this, Mr. Mayor, but there is a pothole in my neighborhood. It deserves its own area code. It's big. So
It actually is a complex challenge.
I know.
Diminish the seriousness with which and the gravity.
No, it's true. So the grayness between simple and complex, these are permeable boundaries. So here's what, some of you have seen that before, and we could have done, there's lots of ways of distinguishing simple, complicated, complex. Many of you have read Brenda Zimmerman's Getting to Maybe book, Francis Wesley and Michael Quinn Patton. Here's, we're getting better at describing them and saying that complex issues, simple issues are really plan the work the plan. Right? That kind of modality, recipe-like approaches to solving problems. Complex issues defy that. Complex issues are not simple issues on steroids. They are different in kind, and they require different kinds of leadership. And here's at least 3 different attributes for adaptive leadership and management on complex issues. Complex issues require participatory approaches. Now, this probably makes sense, doesn't it? Right? And it's almost sort of an apple pie statement to be participatory, but there's real grit underneath that statement. Number one, if you're trying to solve a complex issue, we need 360-degree intelligence. No one's necessarily wrong on a complex issue, but no one by themselves is particularly right. We need 360-degree intelligence. Give you a couple examples. This is my favorite one. Remember 7-Elevens used to get knocked off all the time? Quite a bit, don't you? Come on, I'm not the only one to remember 7-Elevens getting knocked off. Guess how they actually turned the curve on that? They went to prison. They held focus groups with people who used to knock off 7-Elevens, and they found out, they got some feedback. How would you stop that? Well, bring the counter closer to the front by the window. Don't put $50. Don't put more than $50 in the safe. Say hi to someone when they come in the door. Right? It's a bit unnerving to then have to, have a confrontation with them. The cumulative little things. There was no silver bullet, but there was silver buckshot around keeping addressing that issue. So we need 360-degree intelligence. Not so long ago in Dallas, the police informed the health department that recent immigrants from Mexico were not using car seats as they came into the country, and they were noticing this while they were passing out tickets for other things. So the health department, full of experts, came out and created a very nice social marketing campaign, which included all these warnings and kind of benefits of using car seats and the warnings of if you don't, and in fact offered subsidized car seats for those who couldn't afford it. Came back, they won an award for that, a social marketing award. The police came back a year later and said, listen, the needle hasn't moved. So then they got together and they started thinking more participatory, and someone said, hey, why don't you go and do a co-design process around car seats? And so they did, and someone said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you get the bishops to bless the car seats? Now, why would that matter? Doesn't matter. It's not my trigger, but it was a cultural trigger. And so the bishop blessed the car seats. That was more validating than a cost-benefit analysis by the public health department. And the police reported that, yeah, car seat usage has gone way up. The third reason, 360-degree intelligence, that's the first reason, 360-degree intelligence. Number two, just the sheer ownership of the issue. When big institutions come into problems, they have an uneven staying power on that issue, but people who are affected most by the problem are most likely to stick with it for the long term. I know this firsthand when about a dozen years ago we were working in Regina on an Action for Neighborhood Change project. And anyone from Regina here? Maclean's came out with an article, North Central Regina, the worst neighborhood in Canada. Do you remember that? I remember that. I remember the cover. So I was actually going in because we were doing an event, and I was thinking this is going to be miserable, right? Because this was 2 days after. And I got close to the gym door. It was in the North Central Hall. And there was tons of cars. There's kids everywhere yelling. There's music playing in there. And I walked in the door expecting to see despair, and people had T-shirts. We're number one, right? North Central Regina, keeping the suburbs safe. On and on. And I was thinking the staying power of this community, this is not even our neighborhood, and we're getting weak-kneed. about working in this neighborhood, and they live there, and they're going to stick with it. So number 2, ownership. The number 3 reason to be participatory, and I think this is at one of the principles of the Skills Society, is nothing about us without us. Just sheer social justice, democracy. If it's about me, I'm going to be involved in designing solutions and understanding issues. So participatory is feature number 1. Feature number 2 and 3, systemic thinking and action and experimental, I'm going to wrap up in one little anecdote. Anyone from Surrey here? I've told this story to a couple of people who have seen it, heard it. Surrey, not so long ago, when we ran a big project called Vibrant Communities Canada, and Mark Holmgren is here now and now is heading that up. When we ran the first 10-year cycle, we had 15 communities across Canada working on poverty reduction, and the group in Surrey got wigged out because they said, we don't feel like some of the other communities. We're an edge community, right? Vancouver's been around for so much time. People come here in the evenings, but they leave during the day. So Vancouver has 10 Rotary clubs. We have 1. They have history of neighborhood associations. We have none. We don't know each other that well. And in fact, we don't even know the problems of this neighborhood that well. So we're actually not going to start with the big poverty reduction initiative. We're going to start by trying to reduce the number of homeless day laborers. But we don't know, it's complex, and we don't know what's going on. So we're not going to have a plan. We're going to have a real simple modality for working. We're going to get a worm's eye view of what the issues are, and then we're going to zoom out and get a bird's eye view of what the solution might be. So they began by doing ethnographic research and following homeless day laborers just throughout the day. And the first thing they found out was homeless day laborers were not staying in shelters. Some of you know the answers to this, so you can jump in. Why weren't they staying in shelters? Come on, I've used this example before, and some of you are in the audience. Is it that bad an example? It's a great example, because they found that homeless day laborers, the shelters were not allowing people, they were using welfare receipt as a proxy for vulnerability, a 40-year-old practice. So the people got together and said, hey, would you stop doing that? And the shelter said, yeah, okay. Systems problem solved. Next thing they found out is homeless day laborers were actually going to temp agencies who were getting $16 an hour for going to clean up construction sites and taking $8 off. Right? So they went, holy cripes, we didn't know that. So they did a bit of investigation, and they found out that those temp agencies aren't making a bundle either. So they said, redo your business model. They weren't making much money. There was not a lot of room to move on that. So they went to the nonprofits and said, you're working with these folks anyways. Would you fulfill the intermediary function and not take a percentage off because you're getting paid already to do the contract? They said, sure. Homeless day laborers went up from $8 to $16. Then they found out that homeless day laborers were not getting automatic deposit when they were getting the money. How come? They went to the bank account. So they went to the big banks, and that wasn't as easy as they thought. So they went to the local credit unions, and they came up with alternative financial products for people who are homeless. Now, I could keep going with this story because it gets into housing first. But here was the modality. Worm's eye view, insight and empathy into the nature of the problem, zoom out and get a bird's eye view of it, and solve a systems problem. This is both systemic in thinking and action and highly experimental. You have to think with your hands on complex issues. You cannot think the desk is a terrible place to view a complex issue. Solutions emerge over time, like that example in Surrey. Patterns emerge, and all of a sudden you find something that works. But here's the kicker. All complex issues, even if you have a solution, solutions have a half-life. Those solutions work for a while, and then they don't. In business, it's called strategic decay. It happens in social innovation as well. What happens when the construction industry bottomed out 5 years ago? What happens to that Surrey model? There's no more temp agency function, right? The issues are the same, but the mechanisms to solve it are different, and they had to go through the process again. So I don't know if that's good shorthand for us, but all complex issues require that we be participatory, systemic, zooming out and zooming in, and we have to be experimental. Now, the last part of this first point, the challenge of dealing with complex issues is that we tend to work in a management and leadership paradigm which really privileges something called the performance loop. You birth a solution, you grow it, and then it gets mature, and we want to what? Sustain it, right? I used to love that word. Now it scares the hell out of me, right? We need to sustain that response if it works, but the moment it stops generating returns, we cannot sustain that response. It's no longer productive. We need to equally pay attention to the backward loop, the innovation loop, or the renewal loop. Some of you have seen this already. Let's play with this. Who's seen this diagram? Some of you have. Oh, gosh. Okay, you guys do the presentation then. Just a quick summary for those that have not. These are almost like different countries, these zones, different leadership and management characteristics and cultures. You manage something, and then it gets to maturity, and what do? We conserve it. We conserve a pattern. That's really what we're doing. Performance management, conserving a pattern. What are the characteristics of that? We like stability. We like certainty. We have a low tolerance for risk. We like recipes, hierarchies, specialties, et cetera, et cetera. Does that feel right? Those terms? We know that zone. Who likes that zone? Working like a clock, working a machine, working a performance engine. Don't dismiss that. We need that. When we have a model, a performance model that works, you work it. But then what happens? Sooner or later, we get declining outcomes. Now, I'm going to say this. Some of you have heard this before. What's the paradigm of declining outcomes? The first story is, hey, it's fine. Let's just work harder. Right? The model's okay. We just got to work harder. The second one is, I can't work any harder. Let's incrementally muck around on the side. Let's refine the model, improve it, but the model's okay. The third version is, I'm so tired. We need more money. Right? We need more resources. We can't handle it. The fourth one is hyper-accountability narrative. And that narrative is, the model is fine, but you're screwing up. You are screwing up. There's something wrong with you. Focus. Cut. Do something. Well, maybe the model did what it was supposed to do. The context has shifted on us so much that we have to do something else, or we're asking that poor model to do something it was never designed to do in the first place. Right? In fact, if we had more time, I'd say modern mentoring is like this. So what do? We got to go through this phase. We go through the letting go phase. What is this phase? This is a phase, and in fact, in change management, they should not call it change management, transition management. We let go of stuff. We are confused. Things are chaotic. We're angry. In fact, this is the 12 stages of grief, quite frankly. When people let go of something, and I'm repressed, so I barely understand it, but I know people who do understand that, and that is work to steward the backward loop. And you need to steward, because if you don't, and you're going through the neutral zone, people who like stability, i.e. the people or the organizations that were doing this, they want to crawl back up into this curve again. Because at least they knew what this was. But sooner or later, if one can truly let go, and that's why this phase is called release, if you can let go of old patterns and thinking and models, then you can get ready to look forward. This is our own internal life, isn't it? We have moments like this. Well, what does this exploration phase look like? This is the exploration phase, the discovery phase. New ideas, new possibilities. We've just let go, hopefully, emotionally, intellectually. We can pay attention to what's going on in New York. We can pay attention to that neighborhood in the South that everyone was paying attention to, and now we get it. We expand the possibilities, but sooner or later, we have to place a bet and improve probabilities. We have to make bets. And that's what this next phase is, placing bets. We make a choice, we birth something, we develop it and adapt it. Who likes this phase? Who are the kind of people that says, I don't care what the idea is, give me any idea, I just want to see if it works. That's a great phase. It's a different culture. It's a different culture. It's a different kind of being. This is the entrepreneurial phase where trial and error is not even a problem. Good entrepreneurs, social or not, fail 10 times, and by the time it takes us to remind them they failed 10 times, they failed 6 more times and then found something that works. This is trial and error, thinking with your hands. And sooner or later, something new develops and we adapt it. And then we get to refine it and we get to go through this whole curve again. People feeling this? Pretty straightforward, eh? Happens at a project level, an organizational level, at a personal level. Let me just ask you this, because there's only about 7 or 8 minutes left. I'll go back into your group. For just 2 minutes, the 3 questions that you raised in your small group, do all 3 of them deserve to be opened up on the innovation loop in the way we address those problems? So if you're talking homelessness, or what else were you talking about in small groups? Sorry? Housing. Take your issues. Do you think it deserves to go through the innovation loop? Just 2 minutes. Your 3 issues, do each of them deserve to go through the innovation loop, the backward loop? If we had more time for this session, we would say that some parts of our responses to these issues are pretty good, right, and need to be maintained and sustained, etc., and some parts should be opened up for social innovation and the backward loop. So it's easy to be ideological in these things, but mostly what we would find is it depends. But the point of that last session is we have to do good performance management, but if we're in the game of solving complex issues, we also have to be good at stewarding that backward loop. They're equally important. Without the backward loop, the innovation loop, there is no performance. There's maintaining an old pattern. We've got to get good at both. Now that is the power of the platform of a social innovation platform, which is a change lab. Change labs are desired to create space and a platform for that backward loop. Jeff Mulligan, Tim was referring to Jeff Mulligan. I hope this is his picture. I Googled it, and this is the one that came up. Same guy, okay. Change Lab is the process of experimentation in a safe space with the goal of generating useful ideas that address social needs and demonstrate their effectiveness. Safe space, platform, think of that kind of paradigm. In fact, Tim introduced me a phrase by a guy named Cotter a year ago. I love it. He calls them secondary operating systems, and where the idea is that we all live in a primary operating system. We have organizations, governments, nonprofits, etc., that do certain things. They're designed to do certain things well, but we need to step out of that space into a secondary operating system, which allows us to do things we can't do in our primary operating system, right? A container, a space. Now, there's lots of examples of this. Tim was showing there's dozens of labs. I'm just going to give you just a taste of the kinds of things that they've done. Mind Lab, which is one I think we all pay attention to in Denmark, they do so many terrific things. They're a human-centered design group. They run things like Get Away with Red Tape in Denmark, and they just walk through simulations with citizens, and they figure out how to get red tape. Just simple design processes, and they've got rid of a ton of it. Number 2, student success in Finland. This was a course for kids who were not doing well in school, and it was sort of a remedial course, and they found that kids weren't coming to class. The attendance rates sucked. That's a technical term. They were terrible, and so they had a little design session with kids, and they found out that, if you just gave people a syllabus and told them what was going on, like the course outline and a couple of the intentions, people would kind of participate more fully on the front end. They did 2 or 3 simple things like that, boom, participation rates go up. I'm not going to talk about this one. I don't have a ton of time. This BC Family Justice Innovation Lab, this is terrific. In a human-centered design approach, a judge, the head of the BC Courthouse Library Association, several different lawyers, sat outside a family court. They watched people go in. They watched people go out. They just sat in people's shoes, and they interviewed some of them. And they said, we desperately need insight and empathy into what it's like as a family to experience this court system. And they're doing all this ethnographic research, and they're not even talking about solutions yet because they said, we don't even understand what the problem is. Right? Pretty good, eh? Oh, no, I got to start all over. Okay. These things excite me. Okay. So I was just in a lab with Alex and Karen and others. The CoLab is a terrific group, and they're with this Energy Future Labs in Alberta. And this has got to be, Alex, would you agree this is one of the more impressive labs in Canada? And it's 40 fellows from across the Alberta energy system, ConocoPhillips, Suncor, the National Energy Board, etc., coming together to try and promote an energy transition in Canada. This is their second of several different meetings. This was a session to go deeper on prototyping, but also to sense the complexity of the system. And I geeked out on this. They had this energy game where they had a board of the energy system in Alberta. It was sort of metaphorical, and different roles, energy producers, et cetera, and we did role-playing and trying to figure out the dynamics of the system. They had they did a little thing where every quarter, we did it for 4 years, a little screen would come up and saying, here's what's happening in the environment. We had oil prices on the board. I have never experienced something that fun, nor anything as powerful to demonstrate the final point of that session, which is there is no way we can manage this transition unless we do it together and create a common framework. Francis Ford Coppola once said, what's the difference between a bad movie and a great movie? And he said, in a great movie, everyone's making the same movie. The lesson there was, we're not making the same movie on energy transitions. All these diverse players, we're not going to navigate our way out of this unless we do. It was powerful. So there's endless examples of this, guys. And they all tend to have core features. Almost done. They have whole system teams. They want the diversity of the system in the room. Number 2, they have a strong container. They have a physical space. that is creative. They have good convening. People feel safe in that space to do things they can't do in their host organization. And all of them have different versions of a robust process. How to do ethnographic research, to zoom in, zoom out, doing good prototyping, understanding the mystery of scaling, which we're terrible at for the most part. They contain those features even though they manifest them differently from place to place. So with that in mind, the case for innovation. Complex issues require adaptive responses, participatory, systemic, and experimental. Complex issues require that we go through the backward loop as much as the forward loop. Labs are a vehicle to go through that backward loop, and they have these characteristics. We are already seeing this pop up spontaneously around Canada, and the Action Lab is the greatest addition to a very important family of labs. Here, when you were telling me you were formally launching, here are 3 things that I thought the promise of Action Lab is for not only people who work in it, but all of us around Edmonton who need these kinds of things. Number 1, the demand for innovation outstrips the supply. Tim, I read something similar about the 5%. 60% of nonprofits in the U.S. survey said they desperately need social innovation. 5% felt they were capable of navigating social innovation. Right? It's the same for the private sector. If you want to look at the record on private sector innovation, it's not as pleasant as you might think. We need it. We aren't all that good at it. Even though it's quite natural to us, the act of inventing something new. We could be much more disciplined. So boom, there is a niche. Number 2, the political and economic shifts create opportunities. Tim Broadhead in 2008 wrote an article during the 2008 financial crisis that said, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste when a crisis happens. Here's a lesson on systems change. I just figured this out. I didn't figure it out. I heard this not long ago. We don't change systems. That's hubris. Systems are big, complex issues. Most change efforts begin desperately trying to disrupt a system, trying to disrupt a pattern, and then trying to organize things in a new way, trying to change things enough so that the new system emerges in a better way. Most groups spend all their time disrupting systems, trying to get systems change going. We don't have that problem right now. We got a high-class problem. We got plenty of disruption going on. Oil dropped 20% in 20 days. We've got new federal and provincial governments managing uncertainty. This is not great on one level, but if you're a social innovator, this is awesome. No, it is. This is the time to rock and roll. Things have been disrupted. We don't have to worry about that. We have to worry about creating new ideas and processes that hopefully have a good chance of making it. So we've got half the problem already addressed. We have a window. Let's walk through it hard. The final thing. Why the promise of Action Lab? Why is Action Lab so important in this puzzle? There are a terrific variety of change labs in the world right now. But one of the ones that I think is more promising is the approach of human-centered design, which, Ben, you spoke about at the beginning. We know that we need insight and empathy into the nature of the lives of communities and issues that we're trying to address. We know that. But it's very easy to get caught up on our own stories and forget that that should be the center of gravity. Human-centered design grounds us in the insights and empathy of community members and us, people for whom we're trying to create a better world. And I'm going to leave you with this following anecdote, which I got from MindLab from Christian when he came and did a speech here in Alberta not so long ago. It's a metaphor. 5 deputy ministers came together in Denmark because they all had some responsibility for improving the retention of foreign trade workers in Denmark. And they hired MindLab to go do some research on this. And they came together and they said, please tell us what you found, solve the solution. And they said, we don't have a solution. We don't even understand the problem. We don't even have any insight and empathy. So they just played tapes and visuals and recordings of people who were foreign trade workers. And one stood out in my mind. A fellow said, my son was born in a hospital, and I was excited not because of it was our first child. My grandfather was dying in India. I'm a foreign trade worker, engineer, dying in India, and I wanted to name him after my grandfather, whose name was Sanjay. So I was excited to do this, and then the nurse came in the room, and she said, what are you going to name your boy? And I said, Sanjay, big grin on my face, and she shook her head, and she went into another room, and she came back with a binder of approved names in Denmark. Now, before we get all snotty about Denmark, it's a very communitarian culture where that's an inadvertent outcome. That's not planned. That's kind of keep the tribe close and kind of consensus driven. So that wasn't part of their story. And he said, I'm going to give you more stories like that. They played all these tapes, and the 5 deputy ministers reflected on that, and one said, listen, I'm sure glad we did this. I thought our job was to improve the retention of foreign trade workers. I realize that our mission is creating welcoming communities. Action Lab is here. It's already in motion. It's centered on human-centered design at a time of crisis and or disruption. And in a field, Edmonton's no different than anywhere, where the demand for innovation far exceeds the supply. It's going to be a great ride. Thanks.
Time for 1 or 2 questions before the open house starts. Anybody like burning question they would really like to ask Tim or Mark? No? Kind of? No? Okay. So I'm going to go into the last part, which will be our last little collective thing. Do you notice that there's a Duplo block and a Sharpie? It's not to eat. Grab your little Duplo block, and what we're going to do, we're going to bring out Mr. David Shepherd, the mayor, and our skills board chair, Cindy and Paula. And I put my first one here. So we're going to break the rules because we're going to use a Sharpie to write on the Lego, which you're not supposed to do, really, right? We're going to do that. And we're all going to kind of, as we transition to the open house, people can come up and put their little block wherever they want on here. So I put the first one on here. It says, help YAG be inclusive. So it's a wish for what you hope the lab could do for Edmonton, for Alberta, for Canada, for beyond. So a wish that the lab will do around that. So the first few coming up. Yeah, Cindy, do you want to come up too? And then we'll build this awesome structure here.
Okay, so I've just put my brick in here. On it I wrote, I'm hoping that the Action Lab is going to help to break down walls. So new opportunities for us to connect and hear each other.
So what's going to happen after this is a bunch of people were going to come in and we're going to try to grab all these chairs as quick as possible. Most of them, we'll leave some of them around. Stack the chairs, we'll get those out of here. And then there are really cool exercises to get a taste of some of these tools that are going on around. And the ABSI fellows are going to be hosting those around the space. And so you can grab a drink from Vino. We have Color Divino Wines have donated that, so that's here. And there's a tip jar there as well for those guys. And grab a drink, have a beer, hang out, get to know people. There'll be more people coming for the open house. Test out some of the tools, and we'll be rocking. Okay, Cindy?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for the switching up the Lego for my neighbor over there because I had a smaller one. And my writing is not small. So my word is community because that's what I feel Skills has brought for me and for the organization I work for during the day and for the future organizations that I'm going to continue to serve. So that's where I'm going to leave it at.
All right, Mayor Iveson.
Well, borrowing from your organization's mandate and sort of 5 core values and objectives, I'm going to say empower active citizenship. And I'm going to stack it on top of these other ones.
Okay. Maybe we'll just do can we get a pick there? And then I will launch the appropriate song for the open house. And this is officially launching the Action Lab.